Welcome back to Senate Education, Tuesday, January 30th, 3:01. We're going to spend, before Senator Ron Hinsdale arrives, we're going to spend a little time. We had talked at length about S87, bill having to do with Holocaust education. And what we asked our led counsel to do is come in and just tell us, and I actually put Senator Weeks' question on the agenda. How can we support curriculum without being curriculum managers? How can we make a difference in this area? And so I've asked Ms. St. James to come in and talk to us about that issue. And Ms. James, the floor is yours. Ms. St. James.
Thank you, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. So I've done a very, very high level overview of some of the laws that are relevant to this topic. But I just want to start by saying I am not an expert on curriculum. In fact, the green books, I should have done this before we came in here, but it occurred to me as I was listening to the chair.
Rattle on.
I was going to say set up the topic. Curriculum is not defined in Title 16. And what I can help you do is find the various places in Title 16 or the rules that either influence curriculum or dictate some component of curriculum or where some of the decision makers are. But if you really want to have an understanding of what curriculum is, that's going to come from the field. Because my understanding as a lawyer with no background in education law is that curriculum is really about the content and instructional activities that are going into preparing students to meet the goal, whether that's an A or a proficiency or, whatever that is. So, I say all of that to say, I think, and I've listened to some of the testimony you've taken here, and I will, as we walk through kind of these different laws, I might suggest areas where you could ask someone to come in and speak to what's the actual content of this thing to help you understand what's out there and where you might want to exert your influence. That's very vague, but it will make more sense as we get going. So the first place we're going to start is the minimum course of study. You all should have a handout. There's hot links to all of these statutes and rules. So the minimum course of study, again, we're in Title 16, is a courses of study chapter. Section 906 is the course of study section. And this is exactly as it sounds, the minimum course of study for Vermont students. So, and this is all directly quoted from statute or rule. So this is all language taken directly from statute or rule. So for purposes of this title, the minimum course of study means learning experiences adapted to a student's age and ability in the fields of basic communication skills, including reading, writing, and use of numbers. Use of numbers, right? That's what is 0 through 10, counting 0 to 10, all the way up to calculus, right? Citizenship, history, and government in Vermont in the United States. Physical education and comprehensive health education, including the effects of tobacco, alcoholic drinks, and drugs on the human system and on society. English, American, and other literature, and the natural sciences.
So that's what it says about curriculum in Title 6. No. Sorry.
That's why I really, really encourage you to hear from one of the folks in the field, whether that's in the field embedded in the school or from the agency or somewhere in between, about curriculum.
Okay.
So this is the minimum course of study means literally the bare minimum subjects that are required to be studied
And it
or
said
taught,
that,
learning experience.
okay,
That's the bare minimum.
okay. That. Who would read this and say, all right, I'm now going to implement this?
Let's keep going.
Okay,
So the reason I started with this is, number one, bare minimum.
Yeah.
Two, this is statute. This is something you all have put into place.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's go to supervisory union. Supervisory unions are required in Title 16, Section 261, the supervisory union chapter, to develop or assist member districts to develop, and then to ensure implementation of the curriculum, union-wide, okay? It gets even more complicated than just going from minimum course of study to supervisory union responsible for developing curriculum, but bear with me, okay? So the SU is responsible for developing the curriculum, and it's SU-wide or ST-wide. And they are also required to assist each school in the supervisory union to follow the curriculum. And if students, I just threw this in there in case it's of interest to you, if students are residing in the supervisory union but receiving their education outside the supervisory union, technically the supervisory union should be periodically doing a compatibility review of those different curriculum. So remember, curriculum is all of the content and instructional practices that are going into preparing students for the end goal. Graduation. What does graduation look like? We'll get there. It's the very end. All of those instructional practices and activities, books they're reading, the actual subjects, like the courses that are being taught. At a bare minimum, they have to be taught in the subjects of the minimum course of study. But how expansive the use of numbers is,
right.
right? That might vary from supervisory union to supervisory union. And even if calculus is taught in every supervisory union, how it is taught, the curriculum may be different. And I am not a curriculum person. I am just your lawyer.
Who decides that it's calculus?
Let's get going. Let's go to
Okay.
State Board of Education. Okay.
Thank you.
So in this, if you want me to share my screen, please let me know.
Please do.
Okay. So I don't need anything from you, Morgan. Good. At least to let me in. When we get there. Okay. So the State Board of Education is required in section 164, Title 16, which is the State Board of Education chapter, to implement and continually update standards for student performance in appropriate content areas. I can make this bigger. At intervals in the continuum from kindergarten to grade 12 and methods of assessment to determine attainment of the standards for student performance. The state board, that's it, about performance standards statute, okay? So the legislature has delegated authority or responsibility to the State Board of Education to set standards for student performance in appropriate content areas. So we're going from what's the bare minimum topics that we're right? Are we studying reality TV in public schools as a bare minimum? No, we're studying use of numbers as a bare minimum, right? Like we're setting that floor. Then the supervisory union, we're giving them the responsibility to develop the curriculum, and they are developing the curriculum in relation to the standards that the state board is setting.
Hi, this is just a curiosity question.
Say hi.
Yeah, I don't know. The standards shall be designed for students to compete in the global marketplace. Do you have, where does that come from? What does that mean? Just curious.
So I have not done any legislative history in that, so I can't tell you today. I'd be happy to look back and trace how long that language has been in there. But I think generally speaking, that is,
The goal.
compete in a global marketplace. I would say that means, yes, I'm trying to think of a neutral way to say this.
What did you say?
The world, right? This is, preparing students to participate in society at large. And we are not a standalone society.
Thanks. I'm just curious. Thank you.
So. So going back to the advocates that have been talking about total cost education.
Mhm.
In a way, it seems that they should make an appointment with the State Board of Education. Go ahead.
Let's go to the next one.
Okay.
I'm gonna fail you on this.
No,
I am
already,
not the person.
already,
No,
it's
you're doing
been
great.
extremely hard.
So the state board continually updates standards for student performance, right? That's it. You've delegated that responsibility to you, and I'm actually gonna open the Agency of Education's content areas website for you so you can see what some of that looks like. But before we get there, the education quality standards set even more criteria that curriculums need to be developed to. So the education quality standards in section 165, also in the state board chapter in Title 16, the school has to substantially meet standards adopted by the state board regarding conditions, practices, and resources of schools. The standards shall address those aspects of the following that are most closely associated with improving student performance. There's an A that I left out, there's a C and a D that I left out. For this conversation, we're going to focus on B. Instructional practices and curriculum leadership and content coordination. And let me show you what that looks like in today's. Oh. There we go. So this is the education quality standards. These, as you just heard and are well aware, these rules are open for rulemaking right now. So this is going to change. But right now, here's the rule on curriculum content. Each supervisory union board shall ensure the written and delivered curriculum within their supervisory union, right? SU responsibility is aligned with the standards approved by the state board. And then each school shall enable students to engage, etc. And then they have to demonstrate proficiency in. And here's the kind of expanded version of what we've been talking about. So literacy, mathematical content and practices, scientific inquiry and content knowledge, global citizenship, physical education, artistic expression, and transferable skills. How those concepts are taught or what's included in civics or cultural studies and history, that's not dictated here, right? So it's possible that in teaching cultural studies and history, every school has a unit on Holocaust. But that's not required. Now, we're going to look at something else. This is just an onion. We're just going to keep peeling, okay?
While we're on that section, can I just ask, so, where did all of those, where did 2120.5 come from?
This is a state board rule.
So that's.
So you have asked, so the legislature has said, this is a statute, this language is from statute. school substantially meets this part of education quality standards. To meet education quality standards, you have to substantially meet standards adopted by rule of the state board, and that's what we were just looking at. Okay. And that is open right now. That rule series is open and being developed, right? So I'm not writing those rules, so, it's possible that what ends up being adopted has more, specificity than what we just looked at. But current law, we just looked at. Those are education quality standards. Remember, those education quality standards are supposed to be in alignment and in light of the standards for student performance in appropriate content areas. That is a core State Board of Education responsibility, okay? What do those content areas look like? The Agency of Education has a content area website. And you can click on all of these different, I'll just look at English language arts. So Vermont has adopted the Common Core state standards. Now, what does the Common Core state standards require, right? That's what I'm talking about, the onion.
Yeah.
So, when we look at global citizenship, see, I haven't played around with this, but this would be an area where you may want to play around. So these are the standards that all of the curriculum need to be developed towards. And everyone's proficiencies for graduation, which we'll get to in a minute, are being measured against. So it's possible that somewhere in these standards, there is a piece about genocide, Holocaust education. I don't know. But if you are trying to figure out what's already required, it's not in the minimum course of study. It is not in the EQS specifically, right? I don't know what's required in the content, in the state standard, right? You'd have to play around with what's in the state standard. You'd have someone come in and testify about that. And then beyond that, what is each supervisory union curriculum? What are they required? And then to even further complicate matters, graduation requirements are local. So again, this is part of the EQS. So a student, graduation requirements. So student meets the requirements for graduation when the student demonstrates evidence of proficiency in the curriculum outlined in that rule we just looked at. That rule 2120.5 and the curriculum need to be in alignment with the state board standards that you can mine on that website. But also, a school district could also set additional local graduation requirements. So it might be how does this look different? Some schools do some school districts might have like a credit system for graduation. You have to take 3 credits of English language arts. Well, if there's 7 different English language arts courses offered, and you only have to take 3 credits, it's possible that not every student's getting the same content, right? So that's, and then on top of all of this, remember, we're thinking about this in a proficiency-based education system, which again, I am not an expert in, and is really something you need to hear from the field on. But this is, the more I think about it, it really is like an onion, right? We're starting with the legislature, are setting what the bare minimum is, those minimum courses of study. And then you have made a series of delegations. You've delegated curriculum decisions to the supervisory unions. You have delegated student performance standards to the State Board of Education, and you've said that the curriculum need to be in alignment with those standards. And then the graduation requirements have to be, the curriculum has to get you to graduation. It all has to be in alignment with those content standards and education quality standards, but also school districts can set additional local graduation requirements. So all.
But they can't detract from this, they can add additional, but this is
Yeah.
the minimum standard.
Well, so when you say this is the minimum standards, there's really not, it's hard to point to a minimum standard. There's something called the portrait of a graduate that I cannot speak to. It's something that the agency has developed. And so I would really encourage you, if you really want to dig into how does someone graduate, ask someone from the field to come in and talk about that. But if you are trying, as a lawyer, right, I'm always trying to trace evidence back to the source, right? So if it were me and I was trying to figure out, well, what is actually being taught, I would kind of trace back to, well, what's the authority on this subject? And if everyone's teaching to a certain standard, I would want to know what those standards are. And then I would want to have an understanding of what is curriculum, right, versus a standard. And your lawyer is not the person to tell you that.
But if you are looking to make advances on full cost education, where's the lever? I mean, aside from, again, us creating, because 10 years, we don't, or even next year, we don't want all these bills coming into it. We are the deciding folks on these things, and I think it's one of the reasons Senator Buick wants to shift up the state board a little bit. Let's get some more different voices, some professional, well, or professional, like, maybe some more expertise in certain areas. Where do you go?
So I think one lever that I think hasn't played out yet potentially is Act One. You haven't seen the results of that yet, right?
No, but I'm getting, and perhaps the committee, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm getting a clear message that we're not going to see anything on full cost education now. That's what it seems like. That's what it seems like. So, all right, so let's just put that lever aside. It's not gonna be this committee.
So, I mean, the strongest lever you have is adding something to the green books, right?
Right.
Whether that's including some specific, adding something to the minimum course of study, or adding, like we talked about, those kind of one-off requirements. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. About tobacco education.
Yeah.
You could require that the State Board of Education adopt standards in student performance that include certain things.
Does it make any sense for folks to talk directly during a state board meeting and say, this is our concern? And you review this and maybe put in act letters, yeah,
When you say folks, who do you mean?
state board,
Who would be saying that to the State Board?
full cost education advocates.
I can't comment on who should talk to who.
No, I understand, but you can comment on whether or not they have the power to do anything.
The State Board sets students' performance standards. I don't know what is contained in each of those student performance standards. So in order to understand what is or isn't in the social studies, when I went to social studies, global citizenship, history, student performance standards, I would want to know what our state has adopted.
Yeah.
I can certainly click on the link for you, but I feel like that's not appropriate for me to do that.
Because,
my job is to help you understand the law,
right,
and not student performance content areas
Got it.
that have been adopted by the
Right.
State Board of Education.
yeah, that makes sense, yes, Senator Gillick.
Would another avenue be, could another avenue be, in licensure to require that licensed teachers have Holocaust education in their course of study? Cause I mean, it seems like now in our miscellaneous bill, aren't we sort of mandating literacy as part of? I don't wanna, I might be getting that wrong,
No,
but
you're right.
I mean, when you do the modules, you're gonna be getting some kind of,
In our committee bill on literacy?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
cause we're gonna be requiring the modules, which is kind of like a sort of licensure requirement. Or maybe
They
not, like,
started getting required in the 28.
For literacy?
Yeah.
Oh, I
Modules have been.
I thought modules, they were appropriated money to develop the
Got
modules.
it,
Your
got it.
miscellaneous ed bill is setting the standards for educator preparation, training programs and licensure. You could certainly do that, but how does that make its way to students, right?
It's an issue.
Think regarding the literacy analogy, I think the issue with that analogy is, literacy is extremely broad. I mean, we're mandating literacy and history in the rules, but we're not saying you have to become a specialist in, modernist authors. And we are also saying, you have to study history, but, we're not getting specific there. So on a completely different note, that we just comment, I think we also talked about having a curriculum coordinator come in to talk, and maybe we should do that.
Yeah,
Talk about how we,
My gut is, and tell me if you think I'm moving in the wrong direction, is asking Ms. Hedges to come in. Telling, and remember when Ms. St. James said, click on that button? I think for the agency to come in and say, can you tell us what the performance standards are around Holocaust education and social studies and global studies? That would be great. That seems like the first step, and then we could always have a curriculum person after that.
Yeah, so for the record, Lindsay Hedges, Agency of Education, so the folks who cover that would be Martha and Jess, who you've heard from on Holocaust Ed. And that was sort of what they wanted, right, agency ago.
Right. So maybe we have done.
I missed that testimony, so that someone came in and talked about the standards. Okay.
Yeah.
over Zoom,
Over Zoom.
where it fits.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe we'll have a curriculum coordinator in to have this conversation with us to see how they're doing it. Do you have a curriculum coordinator in your district?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I can find one.
Would you mind?
Yeah.
And we'll have that person who could talk to us, I'll put it on the list, they can zoom in. Coordinator. Great. This has been incredibly helpful.
Thank you for being kind.
No, incredibly helpful. It's
You have
it's
the
a good
power
resource.
to change all of this if it's in the green books.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Senator Robinson,
Thank you. Wow, you're running on time.
afternoon, how are things in finance?
They were fine.
Yeah.
People ending soon.
Are you, since we have had conversations with your committee around tax education financing, could you tell us, is that something that you've been finding a solution to or working on?
Oh, we found $120 million last week.
Okay.
Which is totally, yeah.
All right.
Well, I think, so for the record, Senator Keisha Hinsdale, Chittenden Southeast. I think we're in a phase right now where we're trying to fend off new requests for exemptions that create a bigger hole than we already have.
Okay.
But I think there are a lot of ideas out there, sure, bubbling up from you as well. I came to talk about S-171. Thank you for
An act relating to the legal residency of a student following displacement by a natural disaster.
Yeah, I mean, I come to you pretty humbly, believing that this concept has probably come up before, and it's obviously like many things, potentially more challenging than it seems on face value. But I just reached out to Ledge Council and asked, you know, if a student and a family are displaced by a natural disaster, do they have any choice in terms of which school they attend? And you know, where we see a lot of this in economic development and housing is it's often lower income families, at-risk youth who are in housing that's impacted by floods and are in low-income housing, you know, in floodplains essentially. And what I hear over and over again is we have to leave our mobile home community, we have to leave our housing community. My student, you know, my kid has an IEP, they just got settled at this school, and now we have to move school districts, and this is gonna be really challenging for us. Maybe it hasn't come up because we're, you know, having thankfully a 10-year window between Irene and the events of last year. But, you know, this seems to come up so much when we do have an event like this, and the more events we have like this, the more I imagine, you know, families are just gonna wanna keep their kids where they're doing well. And it seems like the financial mechanism is not easily accessible or known to parents to try and accomplish that. So again, everything's more complicated than it seems, but it feels like we should have some way for that money to stay with the student and for that student to be able to stay in their home district. If there, who knows what their housing situation is gonna be like, so.
Yeah.
That's it.
Do it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, did we not look at this last year with a very similar situation? It wasn't a natural disaster, but it was a family that had to move because there was something wrong with their house. They couldn't find housing in their district. Of course.
Yeah.
So they had to move to another district, but the daughter wanted to attend the school that she had been attending, of
Yeah.
course. But
It finished the year or something. It was Senator
Wow.
Chittinsville, I believe it may have been involved. We had a staff member
yeah, it
from
did, it
here.
did. But it ended up
Testified.
being really way more complicated than we thought.
That's why I'm humble about this
And so we
change,
didn't,
but
so it didn't actually end
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
moving. Right?
Ms. Hedges, do you see any problems with this?
For the record,
Please.
Lindsay Hedges, Agency of Education. I don't necessarily see problems.
Yeah.
I would encourage you all to hear from my colleague Katie Preston. She is the state director of homeless education programs. I definitely just botched her title, but she covers the McKinney-Vento programs, which is the federal right to education law around students who are homeless.
And this is, her name again?
Katie Preston.
Katie Preston.
So under McKinney-Vento, there is a right for students to remain in the school of origin if it's within the student's best interest, but there's a lot of federal definitions around who is considered homeless, what is in the student's best interest. So again, I would urge you to hear from her. She can speak to it much more eloquently than I can.
That's 131, that's what it was, high school student legal residency.
And in that case, I don't think, did it have anything to do with natural disaster? Or
It
was
didn't,
just-
it didn't, but it was a very similar situation.
Yeah.
other
Like,
than
out of their
natural-
control.
Yeah, yeah.
and the housing
Yeah.
market, which we're working on.
Right.
But, yeah. If an area was impacted by a flood, it is going to be hard to find affordable housing in that area for a while.
I'm just thinking, the last flood or Irene, you can see where somebody just needs to move a mile.
Exactly.
And for us to say, at least in downtown Bennington, that could be a totally different school district. School. Yeah, and then maybe
It's only a couple miles down the road.
Something was just a Supreme Court decision that said the money falls to,
and this,
am I wrong? Macon versus.
Carson versus.
Carson
I think
versus,
That's.
Oh.
Ledge Council.
yes.
right,
That's another guy.
Yeah.
but,
Does
so,
that simplify it?
so I don't think in this situation, it's a good question. I think what we're trying to do here is, make certain that if a child's home is destroyed during a flood or another natural disaster, and the school is just down the road, or if they move just down the road, then they they don't have to change.
Right, well, let's say, they have to move from, Waterbury to Cambridge. It might be a hike, but their parents want them to do well. And so they're willing to drive them back to the
Can
school.
be very
where-
disruptive.
Yeah,
As kids are making
Yeah.
friends and,
yeah,
yeah,
And they've been paying property taxes in that community, so why didn't,
yeah.
in that district.
Yeah. No, I think my instinct, having looked at this last year, is that the committee thought of this as a good thing.
right.
Even more so perhaps as it relates to this kind of issue. And we're happy to have Ms. Preston in next week to see
Okay.
if there's something we can do to
Yeah.
work on this. I don't see any opposition.
We're all doing flood recovery, so I appreciate you taking
Great.
that up, because I think it's hard.
Flood recovery is a great way to talk.
Yeah.
Talk about it and think.
I think when we
Yeah.
hear about housing displacement, we know that means their lives are upended in a lot of ways, and for kids, that's especially where they were finally, doing well at school.
We have one student that was actually stayed with another family.
You might exactly be thinking of this, of what we heard last
Right.
year in that they did have to do that, yeah. I think that's the testimony you're thinking of.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you in
you.
your capable hands.
Any other news or anything else you wanna tell us?
Oh, I should come with like a much better for some candy or something. I don't think so. We're trying to build more housing, so we don't have as many of these issues that students have.
Do you have a miscellaneous bill in your committee?
Which kind?
Say miscellaneous, I have,
We have a big housing bill.
okay,
Yeah,
I do have a little project that I'd love to talk to you about with animals being allowed into restaurants and coffee shops, and things
I
like
don't know
that.
how miscellaneous a bill is. but
Well, I
it's
mean,
added, but-
I could attach it to miscellaneous, I could find it attached to miscellaneous ed,
Wait till the end of the.
but yeah, anyhow, we'll talk about it.
You're starting to sound like a previous chair of my committee, Senator Aluzzi.
Oh.
But, I'm always open to hearing.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah, and,
Response to this,
you
I
know,
put your name on it.
the only other thing I'll say is I saw my vice chair sort of perk up today about CTE,
Now, your vice
Yeah.
chair is,
Senator Sexton. She cares a lot about, I care a lot about workforce development and training, although I think housing is our workforce development building.
and we're working on CT.
Yeah, so we just always
You can see our
love
list
to
of.
stay in
her.
touch.
Yeah.
About CTE.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. You're more than welcome to stay while Ms. St. James takes us through the bill, but if not,
Yeah, no, I appreciate you giving me the time to do this, and
Yeah.
we're in finance trying to
St.
find
James.
new money.
Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah,
Mary, I
thanks.
sent you easy, a quick summary of Carson versus Nichols. That I use the same website for
Yeah.
Supreme Court cases. It'll tell you what the question is and what the answer is.
You send it.
Yeah, we just send that around. That's
I got it.
that's a good
I
sort of
just want that
website.
You got it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I also have memos on this.
If I still have the memos from last year, that's another fact.
Ms. St. James, S-171, please. We have somebody coming in just a few minutes, but they can wait a few minutes.
Great, Beth St. James Office of Legislative Counsel, we're gonna do a brief walkthrough of S-171, which is an act relating to the legal residency of a student following displacement by a natural disaster. Section 1075 in Title 16 is the definition of legal residence for school purposes. And basically what this section says is it's where you are legally domiciled with your parents. There's a provision for independent students, but I think the majority of what we're gonna talk about are kiddos living with family.
When you say independent students, kids living on their own.
Yes, so there is a definition for, let's see. Let's see. For the purposes of this title, the legal residence or residence of an independent student is where the independent student resides. And it's a child between the ages of 14 and 18 who, by the acts and expressions of the child and his or her parent or legal guardian, has demonstrated that he or she is living separate and apart from his or her legal parents, is independent of the authority of his or her legal parent, and is not economically dependent on his or her parent or legal guardian. And that also includes emancipated minor. the vast majority of the students are gonna be living with a legal guardian, and so for the vast majority of students, their residency for school purposes is defined as where they're domiciled. What this bill proposes to do is add a new subsection to this section. So we're on page 3 of the bill, subsection K. So it says notwithstanding subsections A, B, and H of this section, which all kind of define the normal way to calculate legal residency. For the purposes of this title, a student who has been displaced by a natural disaster may maintain enrollment in the student's school of origin. And school of origin is defined in a section related to state-placed students in the same section, so we're using the same map there. As of the day preceding the first day of a natural disaster, so if the storm struck on a Monday where their legal residence was on a Sunday, a displaced student may maintain enrollment in the student's school of origin regardless of whether the student or student's parent continues to reside within the same school district following displacement. And then notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, a displaced student who maintains enrollment in the student's school of origin shall be counted in the average daily membership of the school district of origin, regardless of whether the student is a legal resident of the school district. So I heard the sponsor talk a little bit about, or the committee was talking a little bit about money following the student. What this would do is it would keep the displaced student in their home school district, regardless of whether mom and dad or legal guardian are paying property taxes in that school district. So they're going to be counted, their head is going to be counted towards the average daily membership, which is used to calculate education spending for that school district. But this bill does not require tuition from the school district that the family moves to. It does not require the parents to make any payments to the school district. So the money doesn't really follow the student because no one's getting any new money, but the student stays in the district and is counted in that district. Does that make sense?
Yes.
There are some provisions, so this section does have a provision for how legal residence of a homeless student is calculated. And it actually defines.
Sorry, Shane.
Sorry, regarding the money piece, if a family has already paid their property tax for that period of time, and then the natural disaster happens and they're displaced, is it that there isn't, and there wouldn't be an argument that they haven't paid for the school attendance, right? Because they already paid their taxes, but a natural disaster displaced them. Is that?
I'm going to skirt around your question and just say, you know, the education fund, everyone pays into the education fund and then the payments are dispersed to all of the school districts. So I wouldn't say that we think of it as taxpayers paying for their child, like everyone's paying into the system, regardless of whether or not they have a kiddo in the system. I just, when we were talking about the money following the student, I just wanted to make it clear that there's no tuition payments here. So if mom and dad moved down the street and they happen to be in the same school district, it's all the same map. If mom and dad move 2 school districts over and they want to drive kiddo to the home school district, if mom and dad buy a house in the new 2 towns over, they're going to be paying property taxes that are going to be going into the ed fund. But that kiddo is not going to be counted in the ADM for 2 towns over. They're going to be counted in the home district ADM. And that number is going to be used to calculate the education spending for home school district. And then that's going to influence the property tax rates for home school district. And mom and dad are no longer paying those property taxes.
Right.
But if they have bought a home or they are renting, all of that money is going into the ed fund anyway, getting redispersed.
And I apologize, you already said this, but how long are we, does this bill say the student can stay in their former district?
Just says maintain enrollment. It doesn't, yep.
Okay.
And I just wanna flag, should you choose to take this up, there is a provision already in law for legal residents of homeless students, and they are allowed to stay in their home school district. That's already in current law.
Yeah.
And then additionally, there are separate provisions when we're talking about the requirement that school districts maintain a school or pay tuition. There is a provision in the law that allows parents to approach the school board and say, I would like my child to be educated outside of the school district, and it's up to the school board to make that decision. So there is technically right now a child who's a legal resident of a school district, a parent could ask the school district to pay tuition to another school to educate their child. If it's in the best interest of their child, then that decision is up to the school board. So
Right.
there is kind of a mechanism for this, but it's all discretionary.
Right, this might, yeah. Give people a little more flexibility. They wouldn't have to go before their school board. We could. Please.
Just curious, in the development of the bill, is there any conversation about who, there's criteria for natural disaster, something declared by the government?
That's an excellent question that is not defined, and should you choose to take this bill up, that's a great thing to explore. Should natural disaster be defined?
Did anyone ask the question of how long they can do this? You did.
I did just ask,
Thanks.
and it's just, it's kind of, yeah,
Open-ended.
open-ended.
Maintain enrollment.
In my gut was, okay, to finish the school year, but again, I'd hate to see a kid who second grade, all of her friends are there and they're just. But anyhow, we can talk about timing.
Any homework for me before I leave you for the day?
This has been
Actually,
incredible.
should I talk to you about the literacy bill?
Great, that's up for Thursday?
Yeah.
Great,
And I will see you all tomorrow.
tomorrow. Hey, thanks a million. This has been
Absolutely.
great. Really
Wanted to
terrific.
step out this-
No, not at all. We're gonna shift gears now. We been asked, it's SNAP Awareness Day, and I suspect others have in their committees had an opportunity to hear from those who are here for SNAP advocacy. We have Carrie Stoller and Jamie Lombardo. Here. Sorry. Both the presenters, oh, here's Mary. Is Ms. Lombardo?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Why don't you join us at the table?
I think we're gonna let Ivy start.
Oh, terrific.
Chair, do you mind? I'm speaking in place of Karen Steeler.
Please.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Welcome to Senate Education. We'll go around and introduce ourselves.
Hi, Nader Hashim down from Wyndham County.
Terry Williams from Rutland County.
Dave Weeks, Rowan County.
Brian Campion of Bennington County, and Senator Julik is Union County. Northwest or south,
Lays it out in the president.
central.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us. Please, floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much for carving out a bit of time for us today. My name is Ivy Enoch. I am the SNAP Policy and Training Lead at Hunger Free Vermont. Again, thank you, Chair and committee members, for this opportunity to testify. We're here with our partners and neighbors for SNAP Awareness Day. I'm going to read my testimony. I'm happy to share it digitally following. Over the years, we've heard many Three Squares Vermont participants refer to this program as a lifeline, and in many cases, the only reason they're able to afford groceries at all. As someone who was raised by an extremely loving and hardworking single father, raising twin daughters, I know that the SNAP benefits my dad received was our entire monthly grocery budget. So I know firsthand the power of SNAP to help families get by, to catch up, while still experiencing the joy of a nourishing shared meal. So I would not be where I am today, speaking with you all without SNAP. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also called by its acronym SNAP, is a federal food program intended to help people buy the food they need and want. It is a program of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which has given states permission to choose their own name if they wish. So this is why SNAP is referred to Three Squares Vermont in our state. SNAP, Three Squares Vermont, same program. The program is administered by the Department for Children and Families Economic Services Division of the Agency of Human Services. And these monthly benefits come on an EBT card that look just like a regular debit card. So a trip to the grocery store with Three Squares Vermont looks like any other shopper's experience. People can use their benefits at any authorized retailer. There are more than 600 in the state of Vermont, including large grocery stores, smaller independent retailers like general stores, convenience stores, as well as farm stands and farmers markets across the state. Each month, Three Squares Vermont keeps roughly $12 million in our state economy. So our federal dollars supporting our local farmers, growers, businesses, and our entire community. So not only is it a vital anti-hunger program, it's a very effective economic stimulus program. People who use Three Squares Vermont must be income eligible and may need to meet additional requirements. Generally, college students are not eligible for SNAP benefits unless they meet a work requirement, like working a job 20 hours a week on top of their classes or participating in work study. Or they can meet a qualifying work exemption, like being a single parent, caring for a young child, or being physically and or mentally unfit for work. So it is a very complex and confusing requirement that can deter students from applying at all. And a growing body of research documents dramatic increases in college student food insecurity, especially among community college students. This increase is due in large part to the rising cost of college tuition, coupled with the expanded access to higher education and increased enrollment of a much more diverse student population. Community college students, who often include first-generation college students from lower-income families, are typically older, have family and other responsibilities, making it challenging to fulfill the traditional SNAP work for food eligibility requirements. In a recent 2022 survey of Community College of Vermont students, 51% of respondents said that they couldn't afford a balanced meal, and 47% of respondents said they were worried food would run out.
This is college students.
Community College of
Thank you.
Vermont students, yeah. CCV is the state's second largest college, serving an average of 10,000 students across the state each year. And more than a third of CCV students pursuing a credential are over 25 years old and have children. Nearly all of those students are eligible for the Pell Grant, which is a federal grant which provides financial aid to the most low-income students, as I'm sure you know. Nearly 80% of CCV students are employed while seeking their degree. These are hardworking parents, students, Vermonters, many of whom are low income. And other states have successfully gained approval from the USDA to define all community college students enrolled in certificate or associate degree programs as participating in programs likely to lead to employment. So in these states, community college students with low incomes who meet this definition are eligible to apply for SNAP without providing that really cumbersome, burdensome proof of employment activity, even though most students at CCV, for example, already do work. This simple interpretation eliminates a major hurdle for community college students applying for a benefit they deserve and qualify for. At the request of Hunger Free Vermont, the Community College of Vermont, and VSAT, the Department for Children and Families is now working with other states that have already implemented this definition to determine what steps Vermont needs to take to do the same. We are excited that soon we'll be able to give all low-income community college students struggling to get an education a Three Squares Vermont boost, because no student, no matter their age, can learn well if they're hungry. In addition to this important step taken by the Department for Children and Families for community college students, there are additional actions that state legislators can take now to support food security for all and to pick up the slack that our federal government really left dragging last year when a lot of temporary pandemic era programs came to an end. So I'll just outline 4 requests that are kind of tied to this SNAP Awareness Day. The first is to support the request for $5 million in base funding in FY25 for the Vermont Food Bank to purchase food and support community-based partners. The second is to support the request for $2 million in base funding for the Vermont Area Agency on Aging to support the increased demand for Meals on Wheels to meet the nutritional needs of the growing demographic of older Vermonters. Thirdly, support the request for $478,500 in base funding to strengthen Vermont farm viability and address food security by sustaining 2 successful and proven NOFA Vermont programs. The first is Crop Cash Plus, and the second is the Farm Share Program. And finally, support S215, which seeks to establish a restaurant meals program for certain SNAP participants in Vermont and direct the state SNAP agency to produce a transition plan to increase the SNAP minimum benefit amount for all participants. So that bill has 2 sections. The restaurant meals program allows certain SNAP recipients to use their benefits at approved restaurants. The restaurant meals program was designed specifically to support older adults, folks living with disabilities, and folks experiencing homelessness, because these populations typically encounter access barriers and challenges with being able to buy, store, and cook their own food. Secondly, the existing formula for calculating the SNAP minimum benefit is woefully inadequate, outdated, and only guaranteed for household sizes of 1 and 2. So S215 would direct the state to produce a transition plan to establish a state-funded supplement to the federal minimum benefit and provide more meaningful support to participants. So these 4 actions would significantly contribute to a more food secure and resilient Vermont. I really thank you for your time and for your consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions if there's time.
This is for, this is not for budget adjustment, correct? This is
Correct.
just for. And you have no budget adjustment requested this month. That you're,
Yeah.
got it, okay. Committee, any questions?
No, this is actually the second time.
We heard,
Oh, you
Fannie
have, yeah.
That's all about it.
I appreciate the piece in particular about college students, CCV students. We did not hear that this morning in agriculture, and so that's a very important part for you to highlight. It's tuition's high everywhere. Students come from all different backgrounds, all sorts of financial pressures on them. Sometimes raising their children at the same time.
Absolutely.
Largely, I think, or more often than not. So I appreciate you highlighting that.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. You know, I know a number of other New England states have implemented this interpretation of the SNAP regulations that USDA has approved. So there's really no reason for Vermont to not do that, to increase access to community college students who otherwise qualify, but really struggle to overcome that cumbersome process of reporting work activity. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lombardo, did you want to say a few words? Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm also going to go ahead and read my testimony today. Hello, and thank you for welcoming me here to share with all of you. My name is Jamie Lombardo. I live in Dorset. I am the manager of community resources at the Vermont Food Bank with a focus on 3 Squares Vermont outreach and engagement. 3 Squares Vermont, as Ivy laid out, is federally known as SNAP. SNAP is an entitlement program for income eligible people to receive a monthly benefit to purchase groceries at their choice within eligible food items like grocery stores, convenience stores, farmers markets, and farm stands. I'm also currently a student working towards a master's degree and a homesteader, and I understand firsthand what is on the plates of college and graduate students when they have to balance working with furthering their education. I'm here today to share with you how vital SNAP, or 3 Squares Vermont, is as a program not only for low-income Vermonters, but also college students, who can sometimes also be low-income Vermonters. The assumption of college students fitting a right out of high school model who has the support of their parents is not today's reality on many Vermont campuses. and many first-generation college students are often community college students with families and other responsibilities outside of earning a degree. With that comes trade-off choices, often sacrifices, as our partners at CCV recently reported to us at the Vermont Food Bank. Access to SNAP is vital to many community college students' abilities to meet their basic needs. Rising grocery store costs are a concern for students across the state, and an increasing number of students are going to class hungry or are concerned about their nutritional intake. CCV Student Resource Centers, which connect students to community resources across the state, have been seeing an increased demand for food resources. In my time with the Vermont Food Bank, I've worked closely with CCV, UVM, and the Vermont Law School to build awareness, reduce stigma and shame, to train peer-to-peer ambassadors in talking about Free Scores Vermont and supporting applications. I've heard time and time again that having access to SNAP or Free Scores Vermont benefits has reduced daily stress for students, increased their capacity to concentrate on their schooling, and overall has helped them balance their work-school schedules. In my role, I not only provide outreach, but also I support direct application assistance. And I can say I've never supported an application in which a student wasn't working some amount of hours to try to make ends meet. The ingenuity of people never ceases to amaze me. Just recently, one of our Vermont Food Bank Network partners, Rally Cats, shared with me a story that I would like to share with you now, illustrating that hidden hunger currently does exist on college campuses. Rally Cats Cupboard is a student-led food pantry at the University of Vermont that was recently relocated into the Davis Center, an epicenter of the UVM campus. Shortly after Rally Cats had been operating out of this space, a custodial maintenance specialist stopped one of the student coordinators and shared with them how appreciative they were to see Rally Cats in the Davis Center. They went on to say that during several of their shifts, they had seen students picking through the compost waste bins, pulling out food items that were in good enough shape to eat. The custodial maintenance specialist went on to say that they always wanted to be able to offer an alternative, but they weren't sure how to address it. And they wanted to preserve the privacy and dignity of students who utilize this as a food resource. Since Rally Cat's relocation into the Davis Center, they felt they had seen this utilization of the compost waste bins far less frequently, and we're grateful to the student-led organization in giving away free food in the campus hub. I share this example for two reasons. One, it's incredibly vivid imagery. And the second is more nuanced, complex, and truly speaks to how driven people are to find creative solutions to complex inequities such as food insecurity. It is vitally important to maintain and enhance programs that reduce the barriers to access, and SNAP or Free Scores Vermont is the most dignified and effective way to do this. The cascading crises have been hit over the past year, including the historic floods of July 2023, rising costs and inflation, the housing crisis, and the end of many federal supports, including the expanded SNAP Free Scores Vermont emergency allotments, have significantly impacted our Vermont community and the many neighbors who live here. Together, I believe we can work to ensure that hidden hunger does not exist in Vermont, especially on college campuses, with those learners become our future leaders. I recognize that you are not the committee of jurisdiction on these proposed bills, but I do hope that when you have a chance to vote on the floor, you will consider the ripple effects of supporting the following asks. I know this is a committee who cares deeply about food security in all places of higher education. Our ask is for you to support on several requests that we will make. Support the request for $5 million in base funding in the FY25 budget of the Vermont Food Bank to purchase food and support community-based partners. Establish a SNAP restaurant meals program in Vermont and create a plan to increase the minimum benefit level, including the Give SNAP a boost to include community college students. Support the request for $2 million in base funding to support the Older Vermonters Nutrition Program, and support No for Vermont's request of $478,500 in base funding for Crop Cash Plus and Farm Share. Thank you for listening and your time today. I appreciate all you do in support of engaging Vermont months.
Thank you. Did you hear this testimony this morning also? No. No, this is, yeah,
Snippets.
yeah. No, but really appreciate you sharing what happened on the UVM campus. Yeah. powerful this insertion. Questions for Ms. Lombardo? It's great having people from Bennington County here.
Thank you. Thank you very
Open
much.
door invitation. Great, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Committee, I think we'll leave it there for the day. The agenda, we have another busy day tomorrow, but have Senator Helix fill up a little bit tomorrow. We have the agency coming back in. We have some CT work that we're doing tomorrow. I know we have quite a bit of testimony on the library bill, and I believe it's later this week. We're gonna hear some stuff on electronic devices in schools, so lots of